take it away. You can share your screen, I would hope.
All right. Well, look, hi everybody. My name's Chris, as Jerry introduced me. And tonight I'm just going to talk to you. I'm going to give a presentation in two parts. The first part I'm going to go through the app that we've produced for the Butterflies Australia project that lets people record data and also use a field guide to look at butterflies on their phone when they're in the field. And the reason I'm going to go through this, despite having given a talk to BCSA before about it, is we've actually updated the app since then. So there are a few new features, some things that work a little better, a few updates that let you do some things you couldn't do last time we talked about this. And then I'm going to finish off with a section on what the project has achieved, because we've actually just wrapped up the grant that we received that funded the project. And we're looking forward to the future as to where we're going to go, but we also are sort of in a bit of a retrospective kind of mode as well, where we're sort of trying to tell people what we've actually achieved in the time that we've been running already. So without further ado, I'll move to talking about the app. So when you download the app, and open it up, you start with what we call the home screen. And there's a number of functions that you can access from this first screen. The account settings are in the top right corner, this little cog icon. It has your GPS information, so that'll be telling you your latitude and longitude, your altitude, and the accuracy, your positional accuracy of your coordinates as far as your phone can tell from the GPS chip that it has on board. And that's really important as a visual check, because if those numbers aren't displaying properly, that means that your GPS probably isn't working properly and you won't be able to record data. There's also two types of sightings buttons, and we split them out because we've got incidental sightings, which are a survey type which is meant to be really quick and easy and able to be done, in an instant when you're on the go. And then there's surveys, which are much more deliberate, planned affairs, where you talk about, going into the field and saying you're definitely going to go surveying a particular kind of butterfly or whatever butterflies you see in a particular area. And so this allows for a bit more setup, and you can record a bit more information about your survey before you begin. And then down the bottom of this home screen is the navigation bar, and you can see your location currently is home. That's highlighted in yellow down in that bottom left corner. Then you can also access the field guide, your existing recorded surveys, and a news and FAQs section. So when you click on the incidental button, it takes you to a screen that looks like this. So if you imagine you're walking along and you see a common grass blue and you just want to make a dot on a map that you can send off to the project, you click that incidental button and very quickly you'll come to a screen where it shows you where you can add a species to the list of what you've seen. And since we last talked to you guys, we've actually added the functionality that incidental surveys can have multiple species. When we first launched, due to some miscommunications with the developers, it was set to only allow one species per sighting for incidentals, but now this recognizes the fact that you might have seen a particularly interesting butterfly that you particularly want to record, but you may also see 2 or 3 other species at the same time, and to record those, you don't want to necessarily have to log, an individual sighting for each one. And you can, it automatically populates a number of these fields. The date, the time, your location, altitude, and accuracy are all automatically populated with data off your phone. But for example, if you've seen a butterfly while you're driving and you stop, half a kilometre down the road and pull over and, get to the point where you're safe and you want to record that sighting, you can actually edit the coordinates, the date, the time, the temperature, etc. All of these things can be manually edited. So even the ones that are automatically populated, you can actually go and change them manually if you need to. There's a section for adding comments, and this is particularly important for anything that might be a little more difficult to identify or that might be a little unusual for your area. It's really important that you add notes in this section that help people understand, help our moderators to understand how you got to that identification. But, particularly if it's something rare or something that's not known from your area, even if it's a common butterfly in other parts of the country, you're trying to provide enough information for a moderator to say, yes, this person knows what they're talking about, and that is definitely what they thought it was. The people who are our moderators may know you or they may not, and so we're trying to make sure that people have best practice in mind when they're recording species, particularly ones that might be a little unusual in your area. The other thing is, if you're on a walk and you've started a survey and then you've walked 100 meters and then you particularly would like to update the date or the time or the location that you're currently standing at to be more accurate, you can use these yellow buttons that say set date or time to now and set location from device. That will update all of those automatically populated fields for you with your current location or with the current date and time. And then finally, and this is the most important button on this screen, hit save once you're done. And that's this floppy disk icon. And I'm sure a lot of my audience probably do know what floppy disks are, but there's an alarming number of people out there who no longer really know what they are because they've never seen one in their whole life. And then once you've saved it, it doesn't actually exit this screen. You have to go to this button in the top left corner to get back to the original screen if you need to. In contrast, if you want to start a survey, you have to set up a bit more information before you begin. So as before, most of these fields are editable. But in addition, there's a name field. So you can give your site a meaningful name. So let's say that you were wanting to survey your garden and you're going to do repeat long-term surveys there. You can give it the same name. You could even just call it My Garden if you wanted. There's no worry about having a generic name. But if you have the same name and you use it time and again, it means that when you go to search on that information on the website, you can search on the name My Garden and it will pull up all of the surveys that come up with that name. Now, if you use a slightly more unique name, then there's a better chance that you won't be pulling in random surveys from somebody else who's also had the same brilliant idea as you and called their garden My Garden as a site. And the other big difference is that you can choose a survey type here. So whereas the other one is an incidental count, it's just a dot on a map. With surveys, you're looking at a choice between point counts, between area counts, point counts, and line transects. So an area count is an area walked around a central point. We typically suggest that people talk about doing a 1 or a 2 hectare survey using an area count, but realistically you can set it to any area that you would like to set it to. With a point count, it's just the area immediately around the point that you're currently standing. So ideally you wouldn't be walking around, you'd just be standing still and surveying the area in your immediate vicinity. And then finally, a line transect is literally just that. It's a line that you walk through habitat. It doesn't necessarily have to be a straight line, but you should have a start point and an end point, and you should survey all of the bits in between that. And to capture that information, once you've chosen your survey type, then you use the distance and the duration fields to work out how much effort you've put in your survey, essentially. This is how we quantify the effort that people do put in for their surveys. So distance for an area or a point count is how far from where you're standing or from the central point of your area are you surveying. So for a point count, typically you would be surveying roughly the 5 to 10 meters around where you're standing, because you're not likely to be able to successfully identify too many butterflies beyond that range. Whereas for an area count, you might put in something like 150 meters for a 2 hectare survey, and that would assume you're doing a 2 hectare circle essentially. And that maths isn't quite correct. I've rounded off a little bit to get to there, but you know, thereabouts. And then for a line transect, the distance is actually the length of the line that you've walked. And then duration is how many minutes you've done the survey for. So ideally, if you're going to do a repeat count at a particular spot, you would use the same survey type, the same distance, and the same duration each time. And that means that what you've done is a repeatable survey. And particularly if you're looking at setting up a shared site where maybe more than one person might be going and doing the survey over time, having those parameters locked in means that you're scientifically making much better data, because if Mike goes and does it on Saturday and Jerry goes and does it on Sunday and then I go and do it on Monday, as long as we've done the same time and distance and using the same survey method, we can compare the results of all 3 of those surveys and look at any changes that might have happened over time. And at the bottom of this create survey form is where the sightings button goes. And the difference between that and the incidentals is that in the incidental form, it's at the top, because the important thing is that you're recording the species that you're immediately seeing in the incidental, whereas for creating a survey, you set up all the details of the survey before you start, and then you do your survey. So you have the sighting screen open the whole time as you do your survey, and then you come back to this screen and save. So in that regard, the notes section for a survey isn't just for notes about the species that you've seen. It can also be for notes about the survey itself, maybe interesting information about the weather conditions on the day that you surveyed, or if there was, say, a fire around, or if you were interrupted for a period of time, you might want to make a note of that. So basically, anything you think is relevant to the survey should go in that notes column, in that notes section. So once you hit that sightings button, the big blue button that's at the top in an incidental survey and at the bottom in a survey, incidental screen and bottom of the survey screen, you get to a screen that looks like this. So it has the species list, and the default is it's the species list for the whole of Australia. And then you have a number of ways in which you can navigate this species list to make it more convenient. So rather than scrolling through all of the butterfly species for the whole country just to find the one you're particularly after, you can do things like using the search bar at the top. This is a natural language search bar. So as you type, it will start culling down the list below you. So if I typed blue in, you would get something that looked like this, where it just has all of the butterflies with the word blue. And this works not just for the common names, but also for the scientific names. So if I were to type in Hesperilla, then I would get just the Hesperilla skippers for the whole of Australia. You can also collapse the family view. So at the moment, they're all organized by family. And if I hit these white buttons on the family line, then and collapse them, then you end up with something that looks like this. And the one I've left uncollapsed here is the unresolved group. And that's because I like to show people that this is actually an option on the species list. If you don't know what it is that you're looking at, it gives you the option to record an unknown species. It's critical that if you're going to do that, you have a photo to upload. Unless you've taken exceptionally good field notes, it will be basically impossible for our moderators to tell you what you've seen based on a written description. They do really need a photo to be able to help you out with an unresolved identification. And it also has an option for day flying moth. And that's because we expect that quite a lot of our people who contribute butterfly sightings are probably interested in moths as well. So it's an opportunity for people to record moth sightings if they want to, because while we couldn't include moths as an option in the app at this time, we recognize that there are a number of moths out there that are quite striking and that people do like seeing them. And also there are a number of moths that are threatened, and particularly things like sun moths, and it would be good to capture that information. But the other option is, of course, if someone puts in an unresolved sighting, an unknown species, and it turns out to be a day-flying moth, then it would be good not to lose that data, to just have somebody delete it because it wasn't a butterfly. So we put that option in so that we could capture that information. In the long term, we can hand it over to researchers who can use it. And eventually we hope to actually add moths as an option, particularly day-flying moths. It's the Agaristinae and the sun moths would be a good first port of call for that. And eventually we could look at trying to get all moths in there, but certainly to begin with, we would start with looking at day-flying moths. You can also restrict the species that are currently being shown. So I've mentioned a few times that the default view is the whole of Australia. But you can actually use this white arrow next to the sightings bar, the search bar, to bring up a number of buttons here. So the default is that it's set to all for both, but the top line is cited or not cited. So if you choose the cited option, it just shows you the species that you've said you've seen on this survey. And if you say not cited, it only shows you species you haven't said you've seen so far. But more importantly, at the bottom, you have nearby and far. So if you choose nearby as an option here, it will cull the list to be just the species that you're currently standing inside of the known range of. So all of the butterflies that are known to occur where you currently are is what you get when you hit nearby. And far, conversely, is all the butterflies that don't occur where you're currently standing. And that can just be a useful way of resolving whether what you think you've seen is actually known to be where you are or not. I find nearby as a list option to be quite useful because it actually lets you cull down the species list to just the species that you're likely to see in the area that you currently are. And it does mean that you're able to very quickly navigate that species list to add things very quickly as you walk. The downside to it is that, of course, while Michael and I have done our best to represent species distributions accurately, and we've based the mapping fairly heavily on Michael's book. There are limits to that. Obviously, some species are expanding their known range quite rapidly. Tonycosta is a beautiful example of that. There are other species where, while we know roughly where they occur, we do record them outside of their known range on a not too infrequent basis. So if you choose nearby, it does mean you might be missing options where butterflies might actually occur in the area, but you didn't know they did. Obviously less likely for your home patch. You probably know the species that occur there pretty well, but if you're traveling, do use the nearby option with caution. Once you've found the butterfly that you're interested in, you can interact with it using this individual species pane. So the first thing you can do is you can add a species count to that line. And you do that by clicking on the plus button. And once you do that, it increments that number by 1. So a short press adds 1. So you can go click, 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 and that'll increment the number up. And if you do a long press, it actually decrements the number. It goes down by 1 each time you do a long press. That's in case you accidentally click on a plus button that you didn't mean to, and you want to get it to go away really quickly. You can also add a photo, and you only have access to adding a photo once you've added at least 1 to the species count for that species. And similarly, you can access juvenile counts. And again, you can only access this button once you've added 1 to that species. And you hit that black arrow and it pops down with this juvenile stages or life stages count. And if you click anywhere in that gray bar, it pops up with this window. This window basically lets you very quickly put counts for not only for the juvenile stages, but also for the adults up and down, or you can actually manually edit. So if you click on the 1 under adult in that, you can actually type in any number you want. That's really useful when you've gone and seen an aggregation of butterflies. I did one time see a group of, I estimated conservatively, about 10,000 two-spotted line blues. And I didn't want to click that button 10,000 times. So I used this to go in and manually edit that number to 10,000 instead of 1. The other visual cue you get when you look at this species list is this little target symbol under the species name. If it's got black dots on it, it means that that species is known from the area you're currently standing. And if it doesn't have any black dots, that means it's not known. So using this as an example, when I created this screen for the slideshow, I was standing somewhere where 4 barred swordtails do occur, but 5 barred swordtails don't, which in this case was Brisbane. But it's just a nice little visual cue as you're adding data, just to help you check yourself that you're not recording something really weird for your area. Once you're happy that you've recorded all the species that you intend to record, then you hit this little white arrow up in the top left corner, and it takes you back to the incidental or to the survey page, and then you hit the save button, and that will save the survey. Now, if you go down to the very bottom of the screen, you'll see that we're talking about this navigation bar again, where it says Home, Field Guide, Surveys. If you click the Surveys option, this is where all the surveys you've hit save on can be found. And this is important because just because you've hit save doesn't mean you've uploaded the survey to the server. This was, I guess, a compromise that we had to undertake because we wanted this app to be able to work when you didn't have mobile reception. And the way we've done that is you record the data on your phone, and then you can wait until you're in on Wi-Fi or within mobile reception, and then you upload your surveys to the server. And you can see whether you've done that. So you can see for each survey line, you've got the name, and these ones are all automatically created, but if you had chosen your own name for a site, it would appear in that line. And then the butterfly symbol shows you the number next to it, shows you how many species were recorded on that survey. And then this tick here indicates that that survey has been uploaded to the server, whereas if it's a cloud symbol, it hasn't been uploaded yet. And to upload all your surveys that you've done, you have to go to this Upload All button here. So basically, you go to the survey screen and hit Upload All, and then that will send them to us, and then they'll get recorded on the server. If you want to interact with a survey after you've saved it, and even after you've uploaded it, you can do so. You just click anywhere on that line where the survey name is, and it will bring up a screen called Edit. So it'll either be Edit Incidental or Edit Survey. But that will let you go back and you can actually change literally anything that you've recorded. So you can change the date, the time, the location, you can change what species you've recorded, you can add photos, etc. Once you've done what you want to do to change it, you hit save, and then you have to re-upload it. So once you've re-uploaded it, will overwrite the existing survey that you've uploaded previously. But I've worked with a number of apps for recording species data, and this was one of my pet peeves, was that once you, in a lot of other apps, once you've recorded the data and saved it and sent it on, you can't do anything to it unless you've gone to the website. And I wanted to be able to make changes on your phone, because that's how most people are going to interact with the data that they're recording. And they don't want to have to go to a website if they don't have to. The third major option that you get is the field guide. And the field guide is a bit like the species recording screen, but it has pictures next to it to help you see what it is you're looking at. The functionality is extremely similar to the survey and the incidental screen. You can still navigate using the search bar. You can see here I've typed in Jezebel, and it's just showing me our butterflies with Jezebel in the name. You can collapse the family view. You can restrict the visible species to nearby, far, sighted or not, so you can't do sighted or not sighted. This is the field guide. If you've scrolled a fair way down, you can use this black and white arrow at the bottom of the screen. So very quickly, that'll push you all the way back up to the top. And if you click on an individual species in that view, it'll take you to the profile page for that species, which will look something like this. You have a common name, the profile image, and you can navigate by swiping left or right. Or you can click on that image and it'll take you to the gallery for that species. You can see all of the images we have for that species. So you swipe left or right, you can see where you are in the gallery progress using those dots in the bottom of the picture. It has the author of the photo, and this is the flight period. So anything in blue is the months that it flies. So in the case of Black Jezebel, they fly all year. But for some skippers, they only fly in October or November. So this just shows you which months we know that they fly in. We don't expect that to be comprehensive for every species. So you may well see a species outside of the known flight period. And hopefully if you record that as a sighting, then that will help us understand that that flight period is different to what we thought it was. And again, you can see this target with the dots in it up the top right corner shows you whether the species is known from your area or not. And then for some species, we have profile text, and for others, we don't. This is a work in progress. But for those that we do, you can see that there's a description, and essentially we've tried to capture enough information. We're not trying to replicate a field guide. We're just trying to give you enough information that you can find a species in the field based on the habitat description and identify it based on the visual cues. And then finally, scrolling all the way down to the bottom is the range map. And again, you can click on this range map to bring up a different view to help you navigate it more easily. So if you clicked on that image of the species at the top, it would take you to something that looks like this. And again, it's got the author of the photo and the description in this case, which you can't see from just the species profile page. And again, the dots show you where you are in the gallery position. And swiping left or right moves across the gallery. But if you pinch or push, you can actually zoom in or out on the photo if you want a closer look at a particular feature. And then you use the cross up in the top left corner to get back to the species page. And then again, with the species range map screen, once you've clicked on that map at the bottom of the profile page, it brings up something that looks like this. And there's a few visual cues that are useful here. The species range is in green. You can see for Meadow Argus, they occur everywhere except a tiny corner of Western Tasmania. The blue dot shows you where you currently are standing. That's you. That's not a sighting record. That's just where you are. Whereas the blue pins are your personal records of the species that you've recorded with this phone. And then the red dots are actually other people's records. So every time in the account settings screen, which I talked about at the very start, which is the cog button at the top right corner of the home screen, every time you go in there and choose to sync data, it will download records that other people have had verified by our moderators. And then when you come to the species range maps on your field guide, those will be displayed. So over time, those red dots will merge and become an actual distribution, an observed distribution for the species rather than an inferred one based on literature. So the green boundary will be the inferred literature-based range, and the red boundary will be the species range as far as we have recorded it with data submitted to this project. And again, you can navigate this map by pinching or pushing to zoom in or out. You can also turn data layers on and off. So you can choose to go to a satellite image. You can use a terrain map. You can zoom to current location using that little target icon. You can zoom just to the species range, particularly for some species which are quite range restricted. That can be useful. And you can this one returns you to the whole extent of the country very quickly. So if you've zoomed in and gotten a bit lost on the map, you can use these buttons to move around quickly. And again, the X in the top left corner gets you back to the profile page. And this is just a slightly more zoomed in look at what the red dots and the pins look like. So I'll switch now to talk quickly about the results that we've had with the project. So these are numbers that I've been given within the last week. We've had 6,140 Apple iPhone downloads and 1,974 Android downloads. Now that's not total downloads, that's active downloads. So that's versions of the app that have been downloaded and are being used and patched actively. So that means we're looking at about 8,000 people have got the app running at this point in time, which is really exciting to me. In terms of those people who are actually using the app to record and submit data, there's only 344. I say only, but that's still really exciting. That's a lot of people who are out there actually looking at and recording data on butterflies and submitting it, which is really, really great result, I think, for the project. When we're talking about trying to make recording data on butterflies a normal thing that people do when they go out in the field. Our most prolific observer has recorded 2,938 surveys, which I found to be absolutely extraordinary. Given the app has only been running since October 2019. I assume that some of that data is not collected currently, but is historic data that they've chosen to add manually, but it's still really exciting. The number of sightings we've had recorded is over 14,000. So there's a number of verified sightings, the ones that our filters and our moderators have confirmed are correct. And the number of incidental surveys in that 14,000 is 10,000. So as I expected when I started this project, the vast majority of people are recording incidental records rather than formal surveys. And that means that this is data, this 10,000 records are sightings that probably would never have been captured without the app. Because for people who do formal surveys may be recording that data in other ways. They may have had an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database. They might have been using iNaturalist or something along those lines. But to have these incidental surveys being recorded is really exciting to me because that indicates that people are probably using the app who wouldn't have been recording data otherwise. The number of species that we've had records submitted of is 280, which I think again is a really good number given that we've only been active for two springs and summers so far. So well, that's a pretty good coverage of the Australian butterfly fauna for a beginning. Obviously, we hope eventually to get records of every butterfly, with the possible exception of the Australian fritillary, which I suspect may, if not be already extinct, it's pretty close. And then if you look at the number of individuals recorded, so this is using the abundance counts for butterflies within those 14,000 surveys, we've actually had recorded over 64,000 individual butterflies in the last 2 years, which is, again, a really exciting number to me. Like, I just think that this is information that will hopefully be useful for many years to come for researchers. And then I've just broken down in the graph in the bottom, the pie chart, the breakdown of the different families. And there's no real surprises there. Nymphalidae has the most by quite a lot. Hesperidae has very few. And I think that probably represents how difficult Hesperids are to identify in the field, as opposed to how many Hesperids people are actually seeing. Probably surprising to me was Lycaenids and Papilionids. Swallowtails and blues are about equal, which I thought that swallowtails would be by far the majority of the species other than nymphalids that people were seeing. So that's really encouraging that people are out there and recording data on some of the smaller, potentially less exciting species, depending on how you view butterflies. This is a range map that just shows, sorry, this is a map of Australia that just shows you where we've received data from. We've got about 140 records from South Australia, and mostly clustered around that sort of south coast area from Adelaide to the Victorian border. I think it's a good start, but I'd certainly love it if more people were willing to jump on and start contributing data from South Australia. We do have a bit of work to do to get a few Northern Territory people involved. But apart from that, I think, we've got a pretty good spread around the country. There's obviously been a few people traveling with app in hand. I see there's a dot from the Christmas Island area, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of records from the Torres Strait. And then, yeah, just a wall of records down the East Coast, which is pretty great, and a good smattering around WA as well. So people are clearly getting out there and using the app, not just in their own neighborhood, but when they're on the road as well, which is really cool. And just out of interest, I wanted to just put up the top 20 recorded species in our data. And this is by number of sightings. I threw in the number of individuals just out of interest, but you can see lemon migrant is the most commonly reported species. Common crow, blue tiger. So, you know, it's not, no real surprises there, but just really interesting to me that, you know, these are the species that people are seeing most often at the moment, which is pretty cool to be able to look at that. And I'll finish up here by just putting some information about how you can interact with the project. Jerry mentioned we are starting a non-government organisation, an incorporated entity called Moths and Butterflies Australia. And the idea is that hopefully, among the other things that that group will do, they'll hopefully continue to look after this butterfly project, seek further funding to continue to maintain and improve on the app and the website. So our website, in case you didn't know it already, is butterflies.org.au. There's an email address, australianbutterflies@gmail.com, where you can access the project and get help if you really need it. We are a little bit slow to respond to that because everybody who's involved in the project is working full-time on other things at the moment. So we're just getting to it in our spare time. But I will eventually get back to you if you do email that email address. We have a Facebook group where we put most of our current news. And we do have a Twitter page, which does get used occasionally, but not all that much at the moment. And then finally, and most importantly, we have just started a YouTube channel, and there are currently 3 talks on the YouTube channel, which detail how to use the app, the field guide on the app, and the website. And I haven't gone into the content on the website tonight, but if you want to, if you don't have a phone or you would prefer to submit your historic sightings via the website, which I actually recommend is an easier way to do it than via your phone, then this will show you how to do that, how to use the functions for searching through data, etc. So I'll leave that up while we have any questions, and if I'll try and give a copy of this slideshow to Jerry by email to be able to distribute to your group. So anyone who wants those links will be able to get them from there as well. You don't have to furiously scribble down that gobbledygook in the YouTube link. Yeah. If you have any questions, I'm not sure how long we have, but I'm happy to answer whatever we have time to answer. And otherwise, thank you very much.